Well, hello everyone, and welcome to our seventh podcast. This is the Healthy Christian Podcast. My name's Tim, and I'm here with my friend James. We're part of Grace Church Milton Keynes, and we have been just so blessed to be going through this series as a church family, looking at how the gospel transforms health on every level.
Mm.
We've looked at physical health, financial health, emotional health, spiritual health, mental health, relational and social health. And then we have finished our series in terms of our Sunday series yesterday, where Josh Luke did an outstanding job
Mm.
asking the question, which we really wanted to be included in this series: what if I can't be healthy? What about when I'm suffering and perhaps sick, or yeah, different types of ill health? What about, what then?
Yeah.
um, is something going wrong, or how can we compute that? And so,
Mm.
yeah, it was a brilliant message. I would wholeheartedly recommend going back and listening to Josh's message. We will touch on different bits and recap different bits, but if you missed it, then it felt like one to point back point people back to. There we go. In terms of just like we're always going to wrestle with these questions at different points, I think.
Yeah.
And so I was, yeah, it was great. So welcome, James. Good to have this conversation. Good to just be chatting and sharing. And this is our last. It's worth saying at the beginning. I'll probably say at the end. This is our last one for this series. Whether we do another podcast series at another time, I can only hope and pray. But we committed to do one of these after each of these Sunday messages, just to pick up on people's questions, just to talk a little bit more. And
Yeah.
so, yeah, going to enjoy this conversation with you. James, why don't you kick us off with just a little bit of perhaps what stood out to you as perhaps most important? It's very hard to pull out just one or two highlights from a
Mm.
message that was just,
Mm.
you know, all killers and no fillers. But yeah, why don't you give it a go at least? What's perhaps stayed with you, kind of heart and mind, most since you heard Josh preach yesterday?
I never heard that phrase before. I wish I had ever preached a sermon that's all killers and no fillers. That's an ambition for my life. I certainly haven't done that up to this point at my great age. Um, I agreed with what you said. I just thought it was a beautiful sermon. Um, Josh shared some things from his own life, his own heart, um, applying truth. There was a really fresh lens he brought to it. The three kind of main points were so helpful to me. So sometimes God, um, so sometimes there's pain in our life. There's pain with purpose revealed. Sometimes there's pain with purpose concealed. And
Mm,
then Josh's third point was, by his wounds we are healed.
mm,
And I just thought it was such a helpful way of framing the subject. If I take a step back just for a moment, we really wanted to include this question: what if I can't be healthy? What if I'm not healthy? As a counter to some, I think, what people would say, over realized eschatology.
mm,
In other words, the kingdom is fully here, therefore we should have everything, we should be everything. And Josh was talking about how the kingdom is here, but the kingdom is not yet fully here. So Jesus is risen from the dead. We are kingdom people. We're brought into God's kingdom. We see God's kingdom advancing through ourselves and through our actions, but we won't fully see the kingdom on earth, heaven fully coming to earth, until Jesus returns. So how we live in the tension of that. And I thought Josh explained that really well and framed
mm,
it really well.
mm,
And just a little bit to what you said at the beginning, so almost like, so am I doing something wrong? If there's something in my life, have I not got enough faith? Am I praying wrong? Am I not mature enough as a Christian? And all those things could be true. So this is a space for self-reflection and for inviting input and support and advice and wisdom from fellow believers. But he really wanted to remove that condemnation that I think many of us can be under when perhaps our lives look a bit more broken than others. And so powerful, inspiring, helpful, pastoral, kind of prophetic sermon from Josh. Just amazing.
yeah, well said. Yeah, so I mean, should we get into some of the questions we perhaps
Yeah.
want to discuss around this? What was top of your list, James,
Mm.
as you kind of came to this topic and reflected on Josh's message? Was there anything in
Yeah.
particular you wanted to start with?
I think so. I talked about those different points that Josh had mentioned.
Yeah.
One of the questions for me was, but that'll be useful for us to just to think out loud about. We might not have clear answers
Hmm.
because every situation is different. But how do we know what situation we're in? So by that I mean, let's say there's an ongoing condition in our lives or situation. How do we know if that's God's will for our lives and He's going to give us grace and faith? Because as Josh framed it, there might be a temporary loss of health in this life for eternal fruit or eternal gain. So God's doing something to this situation. How do we know if it's that situation or there's something going on with us? There's a lack of faith. There's a lack of understanding. There's something that we haven't quite grasped that is one of God's promises for us and we haven't applied it. How do we know which situation we're in?
A great question. I don't know. Uh, I think there's something of a just something helpful, even in just recognizing that it could be a number of different things going on. That strikes me that you can, um, yeah, we can try and be mindful of the fact that there could be different things going on here. Um, One of the things that I'm kind of going to add a question to the list rather than bring any answers, but I was struck by Paul saying I prayed 3 times
Yeah.
for God to take this thorn in his flesh away.
Mm.
And I was like, why did you not pray 4 times or 5 times?
Yeah.
Because but within that, and I don't want to over extrapolate, but there was a sense of Paul stopping praying
Yes.
for this to be taken away
Yeah.
because he prayed like
Yeah.
3 times. Maybe there's that sense of completeness. I don't know.
Yeah.
Is that like the Bible using numbers in the way it does sometimes to kind of
Mm.
be symbolic? But it felt three for me felt like more than once. There's an
Yeah.
element of perseverance and coming back to God again and again. But not I'm just continuing to ask
Yeah.
forever. Actually,
Yeah.
I've got to a place of peace and clarity. I've heard from God, so he maybe that's part of why he stopped, because he'd felt like he'd heard from God.
Yeah.
Um, my power is made perfect in your weakness, and actually
Yeah.
this is to keep me from becoming, does he use the word
Conceited.
conceited? Yeah.
Conceited. Yeah.
So maybe he only prayed 3 times because then he got that answer and that clarity. Um, but I was certainly drawn to that, and I kind of echo the question in my own heart and in my own life, and
Mm.
recognize how hard it is if you don't know, well, what's going on here. And obviously Josh's second point about pain with purpose concealed
Yeah.
particularly spoke into that. Like,
Yeah.
where is this coming from? Is this
Yeah.
spiritual attack?
Yeah.
Is this a broken and fallen world?
Yeah.
Is this something God is actively using, with really clear purpose behind it?
Yes.
Will we just only understand this in heaven?
Mm.
Yeah, what do you think? Try and give your own question a bit of a go.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't have a clear answer. What you said I found helpful, and some of those things occurred to me as well. I'm reading into it that Paul prayed until he heard the Lord speak to him,
Yeah.
and and then he had that clarity. So, and in my own life, I think I can. I think it's right to say that in the past, I may have been praying for things, and there'll be a moment where I feel like I've received God's answer, even though the situation hasn't changed. So there's something about us learning and growing um, in terms of discerning what the Spirit is doing and believing God. Um, and that must be part of the process. Josh talked about essentially sanctification, our character developing, and righteousness in this
Yes.
life, and unanswered prayer, wrestling with God. Josh talked about Jacob wrestling with God. We're changed through that.
Yes.
I think that's part of what God may be doing in a situation. I just would pull out as well. I haven't studied the phrase, so I don't really know. I can't say too much about it. But Paul talks about a messenger of Satan.
Mm.
So, I think that probably is, although you see he's experienced something physically, there is a spiritual attack element of that. And those things are not mutually exclusive.
No.
Happening in his body, spiritual attack, the Lord's giving him grace. So it's not like we're only living in grace or experiencing grace or living in faith and there's no attack, nothing's happening or affecting us. All those things are present. There's a real tension there for
Mm.
those of us who want nice, neat, simple answers,
Mm.
which I am one. The other
Mm.
thing I thought was amazing was just Paul's humility and knowledge of himself to stop me from being conceited.
Amazing.
You
Yeah.
know, I'm on a journey of just trying to know myself and understand myself more, which I'm still a complete mystery to myself sometimes. Sense of why the heck did I react that way or whatever. There's such a clarity that Paul has and a humility, which helps him then hear from God, I think, and rather than push against circumstances. Because I think Josh said this himself. He quoted Spurgeon and Spurgeon's regular depression. Paul could have been in a situation it's like, well, God, I could do so much more for you if you
Yes.
just remove this.
Yeah.
I could be so much more effective, and
Yes.
personal ambition starting to come in. And so it's just this incredible example of humility, of being in a place of receiving from God as well as wrestling with God. There's so many things in balance there. It's just beautiful. And Josh spoke ever so well about that.
Yeah. Yeah. We often think of God being kind of either like permissive or passive within our suffering rather than actively
Yes.
even bringing it.
Yeah.
We almost can balk at that. I can balk at that because I think, oh no, God can't be bringing this for purpose. But there's something of a kind of comfort actually in recognizing God's presence. So
Yeah.
it's not just he's not passive, he's not just permissive and just kind of active, like kind of inactively allowing it, but he's present in and in our suffering and using it for purpose. Um,
Yeah.
I've got this fantastic little booklet I was going to mention at some point today, but I'll mention it now, which
Mm.
is John Piper. It's called "Don't Waste Your Cancer."
Oh, wow.
And I've given this to a number of people at different times. I don't know if it's still in print now, but I'm sure there's probably an online version. Look it up. But he has, I think, 10 or 11 different ways not to waste
Wow.
cancer, which is such a weird like framing at first. You're like, oh, well, how could I wait? But he's like, God is actively
Hmm.
involved. Yeah. So point two is we waste our cancer if we do not believe it is designed for us by God. It's not that just okay, maybe God can use it, but actually there's something of God's kind of
Yes.
active hand.
Yes.
Um, he has a purpose. Um, yeah. So he says don't frame it as like being a curse, but see it as a gift.
Yeah.
There's something of a gift from God um, to us in our suffering, which I think is incredible.
I just thank you for saying that. I just would recognize here there will be different views in terms of how God is working in this kind of situation,
Yeah.
um, and what He's bringing, as opposed to what He's intending or allowing. I think there is a range of possible views there.
Yes.
Where I come at it from is, so I believe, and I know God is wise. I know God is sovereign. I know God is loving, and I know God is all powerful. And I was reminded of Joseph's story.
Mm.
You know
Yes.
how God, the Genesis used the word intended. Joseph says to his brothers, "You intended it for, I can't remember what words, is it for ill or for
Harm.
evil, for
Yeah.
harm? But God intended it for good."
Good.
Do you have
Yeah.
this sense of people, the brothers, acting autonomously? They're making their own decisions. They have free will. They're choosing.
Mm.
God is above and over all of that. The mystery of how His will, His sovereign will works, and how His design works, and His intentions. And we know in all things God works for the good of those who love Him. So God is working, and so that will include ill health. It will include cancer. It will include suffering or disappointment, grief, death. God is sovereign above all that, and He's so big and so loving and so wise, he can bring good through all of that. Josh used this illustration of a rope on the stage, which is a brilliant illustration. He got you to stretch it all the way across the stage. This long, long bit of blue rope, which he was untangling. And he said, he pinched one kind of centimeter of it. This is a picture of our life, the span of our life, compared to the eternity that God has in view, and how God will be working from now and this to bring good for eternity. And that was just, I needed to hear that perspective, because it's not my everyday perspective.
No, no, that's right. And a question linked to all this is like, how can we joyfully accept suffering? I think of hardship and times in my life of things to kind of survive. But I was reading, actually, coincidentally, God incidentally, ahead of the service yesterday, and the end of Hebrews 10, excuse me, where the writer to the Hebrews encourages its readers to joyfully accept the confiscation of your property.
Yeah.
And Paul talks about delighting, doesn't he? There's the word delight. Is it Romans 8? I'm sure it's in excuse me, coughing. Anyway, one of the passages that Josh used yesterday talked about delighting. Oh no, it's 2 Corinthians 12.
Yeah.
That I delight in weaknesses.
Yeah.
And obviously we know Jesus, for the joy set before him, he endured the cross.
Yes.
And so I guess my question is, how do we accept
Yeah.
and delight in
Yeah.
our weaknesses and our suffering
Yeah. Yeah.
when bad things happen?
Two things just jumped out at me as you're talking. The first one was just one of the Bible reading resources I use currently from this morning, was looking at Psalm 42, and instead the psalmist is not listening to his troubled heart, but addressing it, taking his soul in hand, saying, "Remember this, O my soul. Um, you know, put your hope in God, for I will yet praise Him." So there's very much the not letting the circumstances define what my response is. And I also remembered, I love the J.B. Phillips translation of one passage in James, really old translation, but I still like it. And James chapter 1, when all kinds of trials and temptations crowd into your lives, my brothers and sisters, don't resent them as intruders, but welcome them as friends. Realize that they come to test your faith and to produce in you the quality of endurance. But let the process go on until that endurance is fully developed, and you will find you've become men and women of mature character with the right sort of independence. It goes on a little bit about that. And
Welcome
so
them as
there's this,
friends.
there's this, you're not resisting them, get out, keep out my eyes. Okay, God is designing, God's intending for good here. And it makes all the difference in my life. If I'm going through a difficulty, I'm thinking, no, God, like you were saying earlier, God intends this for good. And so how am I holding on to him through this? The Lord is my helper. I will yet praise God through this. And it transforms our experience. Just going back to what we said earlier, I don't really know that there's a simple or complete answer as to whether or not a question in our lives is, okay, do I need to push through this? Do I need to seek God for answer? And I think probably I would say, don't do it in isolation.
Yeah. Great.
So, have someone who you know is going to bring you wise counsel, who will be praying for you and with you. So if there's revelation, that God may speak through them as well. And I think probably it's biblical to keep pressing in until there's wisdom in your spirit that is, no, God's answering here. Now I've got to settle peace and faith for this situation, or God speaks. But if not, to keep pressing in, because maybe that's what this is about. It's about the wrestling with God. I recognize that some situations that's incredibly difficult, and but that would be probably where I'd start.
And that's a great answer. Yeah. Okay. I had a question that perhaps um, took us to a bit more of a personal place
Yeah.
for a moment because I thought Josh served us beautifully in sharing some fantastic stories from um, people kind of out there. He shared the incredible story of Nick is it Vujicic? Um, and
Mm.
I thought that was stunning. But he also shared some stuff from his own life and was
Yeah.
really brave and really vulnerable and really kind of reminded us all of our own sort of stories and
Mm.
kind of within what he was saying at one point at least, I think maybe linked to the Jacob, talking about Jacob, he said, "Never trust a leader who doesn't walk with a limp."
Mm.
I was like, oh yes, amen. Like actually, we're not to lead or kind of project ourselves out into the world as people who've got it all together.
Yeah.
Whether that's in our families or it's in the workplace.
Yeah.
Um, I just wondered if there's any stories we could share of our own lives, James.
Mm.
Feel free to kind of go as
Mm.
deep or as not as you prefer, but where there's something of a limp that perhaps even has come through kind of wrestling with God
Mm.
as Jacob did. And you may or may not know some of the kind of purposes and reasons behind it and what that leads to. But I
Yeah.
just wondered if it was appropriate to share any
Yeah.
of some of our stories as Josh did so beautifully.
Yeah.
I'm happy to go first if that gives you thinking time.
Yeah. 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 Probably there's a few things I could say. I'm not sure which one. Yeah, you go first.
Yeah, because I think there's something for me as I hear about that God actually works through our weaknesses more than our
Mm.
strengths. God's
Yeah.
fruitful through that. That just like I think that's everyone's story, but that echoes with me so much as something
Yeah.
of a kind of a
Yeah.
realization of perhaps a kind of life story for myself.
Yeah.
And my head goes to 10 different places at once as examples from my own life.
Hmm.
A couple of them would have been areas where I've struggled with sin and stuff, particularly where I'm just like going against God's way.
Yeah.
And as I've got some help, healing, freedom, forgiveness from that, and then shared that with others,
Yep.
particularly other men
Yes.
in areas of my life, particularly as a younger man, that has borne fruit in their life.
Yeah.
So actually, it's through a limp and a weakness and a
Mm.
brokenness that actually
Mm.
God has somehow brought redemption and fruitfulness through it.
Yes.
I think about some areas for myself in terms of mental health, emotional health, and grief. Just this is much more recent. This is last sort of 3 to 5 years.
Yeah.
I feel like I've been on a transformational journey, learning about sadness and fear and anger and some of the this ties into one of our earlier podcasts where
Mm.
I've learned to realize those things aren't to be hidden,
Mm.
those limps aren't to be kind of pretended they're okay. Imagine trying to run along if something's hurting and you're pretending you aren't limping. You're going to cause yourself more pain.
Yeah.
But actually, again, through kind of facing them, through some healing, but also just an acceptance of vulnerability and brokenness. God is and has and is using that for fruitfulness. And so, kind of
Yeah.
to admit, I walk with a limp in
Yeah.
terms of sometimes some anxiety that I struggle with, some kind of low level depression I struggle with.
Mm.
I struggle at times with anger issues
Mm.
and just
Yeah.
yeah. So that would be just another quick example. But yeah, I would see it right throughout my life.
That's great. And I think it's just so helpful when we're able to say, yeah, I've really struggled with this, or I am still working this out.
Hmm.
And probably for me, you could pick any area of my life where I feel like I'm so not arrived. I was racking my brain. I think there's three things that readily occurred to me. One would be when Karen was pregnant
Mm,
with Ben,
mm,
and we had a real health scare for him. And we obviously experienced that differently. Karen did to me because um, she's carrying the baby, and so it feels different. But there was a 2 week period where we were waiting for tests
wow.
and test results, and um, how just frightening that was, and how it felt, and the something about learning about how, how could God bring good from this?
Mm.
I think Josh talked about that, or we might have talked about it in the prayer meeting. I can't remember. When situations feel impossible, it feels impossible to believe how God could bring good from this. That was definitely one. Another one would be probably related to the boy's health as well, our son's health at different points. And okay, this is going to be an ongoing condition,
Mm.
and how to have hope in that when okay, this is going to be permanent now, and how different that was certainly to my expectations for their lives.
Yes.
And so something around disappointment, something around um, your view of the future, your vision of the future, having to let go of,
Mm.
um, and finding God in that, and trusting God and believing God in His goodness, rather than solely or mainly praying, for God to change that situation, and the struggle of that. And for me, on the one hand, how to hold on to the belief that God heals and to pray for healing regularly in different situations, and yet having a situation in which God is choosing not to do that at this time, and the personal struggle there in terms of confidence.
Mm.
And then the last one would be not so much around health, would certainly be around work. So if I look back at
Mm.
my career, you and I have certainly talked about a couple of these instances in which things have happened which, and not wanting to overstate it or overplay it, but certainly people at the time were not intending it for my good. uh, and I certainly didn't experience it as a good thing. I can think of probably two instances over 10, 15 years, the last 10, 15 years. Um, but particularly the second one, find God giving me faith. So again, God intends this for good. God is changing me through this. He's
Mm.
humbling me. There's a sense of discipline in this. Josh talked about Hebrews as well,
Mm.
in terms of the discipline that God brings, and that was really
Yes.
true for my life. And
Yes.
um, I wouldn't even say limping through those periods of time, probably just crawling
Crawling.
through times like that. But being able to hold on to, because God had given me faith for just an element of no, God is sovereign here, and He is intending this for my good. Good. It's going to be painful. No one enjoys discipline at the time,
No.
but you know, if God is not disciplining you, then how do you know you're His child?
Amen.
Because mothers and fathers who love their children discipline their children,
Yeah.
and I have not reached a stage in my life in which I no longer need discipline. God I think God will discipline us throughout our lives. He's certainly disciplining me through my life. So those are some of the things that would jump out at me.
Fantastic, James. Yeah, and thank you for kind of leading us to that place of remembering there is something of a affirmation as sons and daughters
Yeah,
to be disciplined by our Father who loves us. I had a question about punishment
yeah,
versus discipline. Is there ever, is it possible that when we are suffering, when we are lacking health,
mm,
there is anything of a kind of punishment from God?
mm,
Um, Josh actually mentioned to me in passing after the preach he gave about 1 Corinthians 11, where the Corinthian church are getting ill from I guess, abusing the Lord's Supper.
yes,
I was reading an obscure passage in 1 Samuel 5 where the Ark
mm,
of the Covenant's been captured by the Philistines
yeah,
and they don't know what to do with it, and it's causing them to get tumors,
yeah,
cancerous tumors.
yeah,
And maybe I shouldn't line those two together, but just kind of some slightly odd examples that I don't fully understand myself. And so maybe just to kind of repeat the question,
yeah,
can God be
yeah,
punishing us
yeah,
through ill health?
yeah. So I'm just looking at the First Corinthians 11 passage, so I'm clear. Yeah. So uh, there's judgment and there's punishment.
Right.
I'd probably
Good framing.
differentiate. between
Yeah.
those two things. Judgment, God's judgment on a situation. Is it for good? Is it for bad? Is it following
Yeah.
his will? Is it not? Are there consequences or are there blessings? And then there's punishment. So I would say for the believer, there isn't punishment in this context.
No.
But the truth is that when we do stupid things, there will be consequences and there will be judgment as well. But I would say that isn't judgment in terms of salvation and our eternal destiny or security. It's the consequence of a child not obeying their father. Um, and maybe I'm artificially differentiating actually punishment and judgment. So I know when my sons were young, they did something wrong, willfully rebellious. Punishment was important so that they would lead them to repentance and growth and better choices.
Hmm.
So I'd need more time to give a better answer than that.
Yeah, it's a tough
The
one.
First Corinthians 11 passage is really interesting, um, and it's one of the ways that helps me remember and always hold the holiness and the seriousness of the Lord's Supper, because doing it regularly, I can and we can perhaps take it a bit for granted, but it's such an important moment for us to commune with Jesus and with each other. Um, I lost the thread of the question.
Yeah,
What
no.
would you say?
Well, I think what you said between judgment and punishment is helpful. And when you're talking about your sons, I was thinking that so you're disciplining them with a purpose
Yes,
to help bring about their kind of good, and that
yes,
that feels very different to punishing you in terms of like I guess we just would under grace not have this amazing realization now that we're not under condemnation and
yes.
punishment, but we are still disciplined.
Mm,
Um, I live my life often forgetting just the incredible holiness
yeah,
and awesomeness that God has and is.
yes,
And that's where the 1 Samuel 5 passage takes me. That's where I
yeah,
went in my kind of
yeah,
praying and kind of wrestling with this. I was like, this is
yeah,
obscure, God. And I'm just like, I'd had a conviction of like, I'm quite casual with the things of God. And yes, we are under grace now. And there is an incredible freedom that I can just boldly approach the throne of God. Some of the guys, they look inside this box, this Ark of the Covenant. They look
yeah, yeah,
inside and they die.
yeah,
I just think I would be right with them. I'll just be nosy, just have a peek. I'll just be casual and praise God that Jesus has taken our
yeah,
punishment,
yeah.
you know, and by his stripes we're healed. So I think I don't believe God is punishing us. I do wonder if there is something of a sense at times of consequence
Mm,
to living outside of God's best.
yes.
Um, and within all of that, there's we've got to remember we live in a broken world, in a sin sick
Mm,
world.
mm,
Um, yeah.
mm. Really good question.
Well, have you got any questions you wanted to wrestle with or share or
No, the
introduce?
question I already asked was my main one. Is just how do we know? Situation in someone's life could be a long-standing thing. They may be born in a certain situation or certain condition. How do we know? Um, and the thing I just come back to, I'd be interested if you have anything to add to that. But the thing I would come back to as well is, we can't please God without faith.
Mm,
So the thing I'd question in my own life, if I've just got to have settled, okay, fine, it's always going to be like this. I can't do anything about it. God's not listening to me. I don't believe that's faith. So whereas Paul, in what he's writing, he heard from God and he's believing what he heard, and he's now believing that there's grace for him because God's grace is made perfect in weakness. So I think there's something about, is it a faith response, would be important there. Would you add anything else? Just thinking about some situations, whether it's in your own life or it's how you've counseled others, or in terms of someone's genuinely in a place where I'm just not sure. I'm not sure what to do. I'm not sure whether this is God's will for me, or I should be pushing him and wrestling with him for more.
Yeah, I think the answers you've given would probably be most of what I would want to say, or just, you know, hope someone reflects on the don't wrestle alone.
Yeah,
Get counsel, get advice. You know, that suffering lead you not to isolation, but to community. I think that kind of faith position, perhaps to say, okay, I can just have a bit more acceptance here.
yeah,
Um, Acceptance kind of by faith rather than resignation, like
yeah,
giving up.
yeah.
That's a really helpful distinction and difference that you shared. Yeah, I don't. I I have seen people. In fact, there are people in our own church family who just continue to quietly ask God for healing.
Mm,
Um, I don't think it'd be appropriate online to share the person's name, but there's someone I'm particularly thinking of who has really, really pronounced eyesight difficulties in our church family. And I've had the privilege of praying for
mm,
him many times, and he keeps just asking God, um, would you heal me? And I don't sense in him a lack of peace actually, but almost just permission. I can keep asking my father. I love actually wasn't it was Nick. He keeps a pair of shoes in his closet. Oh, so I don't know him personally, so this is kind of from a distance. But maybe it's just another example. So I wonder if there's something of, as a child who knows his father loves him, we can keep asking him for things. You know, if we continue to suffer, so many like decades long suffering that people go through. Keep asking him, keep moving forward as well. I would say there's
mm.
something about it, like, don't let this stop you serving Jesus
Yeah,
and
great,
extending his kingdom in the midst of continuing to ask him. I do
great.
wonder if it's possible to get stuck
Hmm.
and until this bit's resolved, I can't do anything.
Yes,
And I recognize the deep agony and pain there, and
yes,
beyond what I would have personally experienced. But I would say gently, is there a way you can continue to serve Jesus, continue to be fruitful? You know, as a child, as a son or daughter of the King, as made in the image of God, baked in to who you are, is something of being fruitful and multiplying and believing that God can work in you and through you, even in your suffering. Yeah, even through that limp, even through that weakness. Is there something here of God's purposes that He can use? Not once the story's not once it's quote unquote fixed,
yeah,
not once you're better, but right now in the valley. You know, there's fruit in the valley.
yeah,
And so, what could that be? I think I'd want to ask and explore that question gently, because I recognize the stuckness, the kind of
yeah,
just agony of not being able to move forward, and almost be like, is there a season where you can um, process that pain? So it was beautiful that Josh said Paul never minimizes the pain.
yeah.
That his thorn in the flesh, he doesn't. There was, and what God said to him, God never said, "Get over it. It's not that bad."
Hmm.
Some people have had worse.
Yeah,
Never, never said anything like that.
no,
Actually, let's lament the Job story.
yeah,
Job's agony he pours out to God. I can't remember quite what the phrase was, but Josh said, "Is there room in our minds for
mm,
a healthy follower of God to look like
mm,
kind of how it would have been better for me not to have been born?"
yeah,
That honesty,
yes,
and then that sitting and waiting, but then also a recognition that there could well be fruit here,
yes,
even if no, and even that eternal perspective as well. I think
yeah.
eternity's got to be held within it too. I'd given like the world's most rambling answer there, but hopefully there's something good in it.
It's fantastic, and I think what you said around what it made me think about after what you said was how it could be that when something in our lives is different or not fixed compared to someone else's, we sort of feel like a bit of a second-class citizen.
Yeah,
But we're all made in the image of God,
yeah,
and so there isn't first class and second class. We all come to the cross. We're all beneath the cross, and we're all made in God's image. And it could be really easy for us to put certain things on pause until we get this thing from God, and then we can serve or be effective or productive. Well, no, that's not God's will for us. It's really helpful. And it made me think about the cross as well. So in the lead up to Easter, I'm speaking on Good Friday at church, and of, just the hope that's there. So there has never been a more despairing, hopeless moment in time than Jesus being nailed to the cross in history, and there will never be a moment that is as despairing as that in the future. And even in that, the lowest point of history, of possible human history or creative history, God transforms that into victory. So, that is why those are the kind of things that I try to hold on to and remind myself when I have lost hope and when I am despairing about a situation. The God who loves me and the God who I'm holding on to, the God who is my helper, the God who's keeping me in the situation I'm in, he hasn't answered us yet, that power that raised Jesus from the dead is working in me. So it's not like God has got, a power outage or electricity prices are a bit too high this month, so he can't kind of, direct some towards me. His purpose, his will, his love is operating in my life.
Yes.
And if I'm trying to push through, I'm not getting there, or I've got a settled, okay, this is God where you've got me for now. There's hope in that, which I need, because I can get hopeless and despairing quite quickly.
Yeah, amen. And when you said we all come under the cross to the foot of the cross, I was going to say, and we all in Jesus have his resurrection life in us. We are,
Yes.
so okay, how do I know what's going on? What's happening in my suffering? Well, one thing is God cares. That Josh said brilliantly, that we don't always know the answers, but one thing we do know is he cares. One thing we know is we're new creations.
Yes.
We now in the midst of your limping and suffering and pain and agony and sitting there covered in ashes and sores like Job, and saying, "Oh, it would have been better if I hadn't been born." Well, actually, Job didn't have this. We do. Well, I'm a new creation. I have the Holy Spirit living in me. Jesus said to me, he's never going to leave me or forsake me. And so there is something to just remind ourselves, isn't there, in terms of both sides of the cross. I'm going to preach. You're talking about what you're preaching on Friday, Good Friday. I'm preaching on Easter Sunday, and I love looking at Thomas and the story of Thomas after Resurrection Sunday. The guy who misses out, he's popped out for a pint of milk and some digestive biscuits. Everyone else meets Jesus resurrected, and I'm going to call it the longest week, but it leads to the clearest view. Thomas, he's like Judas. The only other guy he can compare himself with, all the others have seen the resurrected Jesus, apart from me and Judas, and we know how Judas' story ends.
Yeah.
So, it's really dark. He stays in the darkness of kind of Easter Friday and Saturday. The sun hasn't really come up for Thomas for a whole week. It's the longest week, and yet he is the person who seemingly has that clearest view of who Jesus is. He says, "My Lord and my God."
Yeah.
And Jesus says to the disciples when he greets them, "Peace be with you." And he says it very personally to Thomas, "Peace be with you." And so there's something there as well, isn't there, to journey into? You said hope, and I think alongside that peace, that Jesus will come to you at the, in your darkest hour, in your longest week, he will come to you, and he breathes his peace into you by the Holy Spirit.
Yeah, that's beautiful. I'm looking forward to Easter.
Yeah, there's some highlights there. James, anything else we wanted to cover as we I had one quick question about how to be a friend to Job.
Yeah. Great question. Yeah.
Which would you?
Yeah.
So Job's three friends.
Yeah.
they almost kind of got it right early on. They were sat there silent, and then they got it wrong by opening their big mouths. And how often is that the case for me too? And then yeah, I mean, what if you, knowing what we know now, if you were one of Job's mates, anything you would do, anything you try not to do, anything you'd encourage others to do to be a friend to someone in a Job or Paul or Jacob sort of season.
I think we should do a series on Job, because it
Oh,
would be so rich and so helpful, um, and so applicable. Um,
hmm,
Without having studied Job properly, the book, I think that where Job's friends get into trouble is they start okay because they talk about the general truths about God, but then what they do, they hear Job's specific personal suffering, and then they try to um, uh, discern it fully in terms of what God is doing or what Job is doing, and they seem to apply it's either this or it's this, so it's a bipolar view. And of course, God breaks and explodes every framework, every human framework. He's got categories that we don't even know are categories. We play like, checkers. He's playing 20-dimensional chess, or even that is pathetic in terms of my language. And
yeah,
so you
yeah,
can only understand God in terms of how much He's revealed. And we have this human tendency to want to know and understand.
yeah, we do.
Josh pulled out, God does not explain Himself. There is no requirement on Him to explain Himself.
Yeah,
And so what He's revealed is sufficient. And if He chooses to speak into our personal circumstances, that's great. If He doesn't, what He's revealed is sufficient. So, and Job friends get into trouble as well when they are disagreeing with Job's own diagnosis of where he's at. And
yeah,
also, they get into trouble with the idea that a human can not only lament, but be angry at God. Because Job is just like, this isn't fair. I don't know what I've done, and I can't get to you, God, to hear it. And there's not like, a tribunal we can go to where someone can hear my case and you're in the other, because so I feel so, and they take issue with the what they hear as Job saying he's fully righteous, he's done nothing wrong.
mm,
Um, and so that's a very long rambling answer. So I think I want to have my cake and eat it. If if I'm if I'm struggling and if I'm seeking counsel, I want people to speak into my life, um, but I want them to have really heard me before they
yes.
say anything,
Really heard them. Okay, good.
before they start to give me any advice or whatever.
Mm,
I also want them to hold on to the fact that they may not have any advice to give.
yeah,
We talked about this. I think I talked about it in a previous sermon or conversation, where sometimes actually the best thing we can do is just hear each other, really hear each other, and then pray for each other
yeah,
rather than giving someone a 10-step list of what they can do.
brilliant.
And I think probably most of our relationships would be better if we in that place. I mean, sometimes I do coaching at work,
Yeah.
and very much not giving people solutions in that.
Hmm.
But sometimes people will ask for, and so they'll actually saying, "Look, that's all great, but could you just give me one or two ideas around these things?" And I think
Mm,
that's different. Someone's asking
totally
for it,
different. Totally
but
different. Yeah.
even with that, I think there's real care needed about what we think is the answer for
Yeah.
someone else's life.
Yeah. Yeah. And why do they want you to, what's behind that
Yeah,
request? Are they
yeah,
lacking of confidence or whatever? We're desperate to fix people.
yeah,
We're desperate to fix the issue,
yeah,
partly because we're so afraid of it ourselves. We
yeah,
can't cope with the tension ourselves. And so we want to give platitudes or quick fixes or the best answer we can, or even just our own experience, kind of slap that on top of the other person's experience and hope that it goes away because we struggle to live with that tension. Um, I remember I think I've talked about my dad every podcast, so apologies, but I remember my dad in his life group. He was just a member of it, and I think it was the life group leaders. They lost a child,
oh,
after like couple of 2 or 3 young, like 2 or 3 years old, and their
oh,
child died. And my dad went round to their house at some point in the kind of kind of days and weeks after this happened. And I think it might have been around Easter time. They just dug the garden together.
Mm.
And I do always remember hearing that. I like just like go round
Yeah.
or go spend time. So I
Yeah.
think what do Job's friends do well?
Yeah.
They do come close.
Yeah.
We when Anna was at her poorliest in the hospital,
Mm.
um, and praise God, she's people might not know the story, but our daughter perfectly well now, praise God.
Yeah.
But we sort of sent a few what it probably was before WhatsApp, sent a few texts out, and one person picked up the phone and spoke to us like, I don't know what to say, but I just wanted to reach out and talk in
Yeah.
case you needed it.
Yes.
That taught me a lot in terms of
Yeah.
in my Job, one of my Job moments. I'd
Yeah.
say don't stay away. We're a bit,
Yeah.
those of us that are British can be
Yeah.
a bit distant sometimes when people are suffering. Come close,
Yeah.
but don't fix. I think what you said, listen well, pray.
Mm.
You don't need to pray that everything's right. You don't need to do the perfect prayer. Pray, God, we don't know what to ask, but we just ask for
Yeah.
your love and your
Yeah.
goodness to come.
Yes.
Um,
Yeah.
yeah, I'd say that. Don't stay away, but
Mm.
come close,
Yeah.
listen, don't
Yeah.
fix,
Yeah.
just love people and help them like see it through their eyes, help them kind of
Yeah.
process it from their frame of reference, I
Yes.
think.
Yeah. 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 That's so helpful. It's probably one other thing that occurs to me, and I
Mhm.
don't know whether then you kind of want to sum up in terms of things that are just, yeah,
I've got 10 more questions.
most. Well, that's the next series. Josh talked about, I'll mangle the verse, but with the comfort we receive, we comfort others.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
so, what could
great.
people do that's helpful without laying it on people as a heavy thing, something that you have to do, or that it's not that, but still, it's a thought. Um, I think, I think it can really help us. If let's say we're struggling with an ongoing situation, or we've received it as something. Okay, this God, this is you've revealed now. This is for me for the next season or whatever. I'm carrying this. I'm living with this, or it's permanent. I think there's a positive stance we can take is being willing to encourage others and or pray for others who are in similar challenging situations.
Mm,
And I think that that's what that verse in one of the Corinthians says. That's what it's about. But I also think it does something in our souls,
mm,
and I think hope is released and created in those moments, and helps us get out of despair. And that's part of the fruit I think that God may want to bring in situations. I say that lightly. I'm not saying that's something that we all have to now, look for people and do things. I believe that God will make those connections naturally. His spirit will speak to us and bring us
mm.
into the orbit of people who need it at the right time. But I think we can have that. We can be looking for that, and there can be an openness in that. And I think that's part of what it means to respond with faith, and that God will do things in us as well as we'll be a channel of his grace towards others.
Yeah, well said. That's really good, James. Yeah, I think my last kind of thought and question that I don't necessarily think we'll even try and answer, but just to kind of let it kind of hang is just this wondering in my mind of whether we are suffering averse to the point that comfort is like an idol. I think it
Yeah,
is for me at
yeah,
times.
yeah,
And I was so moved by Josh's story of the gamblers and Epaphroditus, who risked his life
yeah,
for Paul, and this
yeah,
idea of like, if you're living with eternity in mind, then actually to live for kind of everything, to be suffering free on this. If it's kind of like to miss the point, Jesus didn't live like that. Paul didn't live like that.
no,
I'm wondering, just as a challenge for myself, if I'm almost so afraid of suffering that I kind of don't believe God for all that He would want to use it
yeah,
kind of through suffering for His kingdom's purposes, kind of
yeah.
with eternity in mind. And so I guess like, even do we suffer enough? In terms of how we live our lives. It's a big question and a tough question, but just to leave that one kind of hanging in the air as well.
Good
I
thought.
just want to say a big thank you to you, James, for the time you've carved out to record these podcasts alongside me. You've been really generous with that. I want to say thank you to anyone who's made it this far. I mean, if there is one person listening right now and you've listened all the way through, in fact, let me ask you this. If you've listened all the way through and you're hearing me right now, send me or James, and you've got our numbers, send me and James on WhatsApp just to say hi. And yeah, I hope that thank you for people who have stuck it out and have
Yeah.
joined in. It's been encouraging to hear that people are listening and watching, and I hope it's been an encouragement. It's certainly been fun. I've certainly been blessed through it.
Mm.
We trust that God uses these things, and I'm sure He has. So thank you, James. Thank you, everyone, for listening. It's been a great series. How the gospel transforms our health on every level. And even in the midst of suffering. So yeah, it's been a great place to land today. May God bless you richly. Come and join us at Grace Church Milton Keynes anytime you want to. You're more than welcome. You can find us on our website, and yeah, we look forward to connecting with you at some point in the future. Thanks, James.
Thanks, Tim.
God bless you. Bye bye.